Andrew, how do we compare the Christian or even Abrahamic religion's view of the nature of existence with those of Eastern traditions? I mean, issues of fundamental reality, the nature of causation, the existence or non-existence, and what you do with abstract objects, issues of immortality or eternity, infinity, these fundamental metaphysical principles.
Yeah, so there's a lot we can talk about, and we can let's start with infinity, for example. In the Eastern traditions, we find that many Eastern traditions, such as Buddhism, for example, they think that the universe has no beginning. When I talk about universe, I talk about reality as physical reality as a whole, right? So, I mean, they talk about the cycles of universe. So, for example, it could be one universe followed by another universe, and this is quite a bit similar with some cyclical cosmologies that some have talked about. Yeah. So we find this in the Buddhist, also Hindu tradition, right? Talk about these cycles. So endless cycles without beginning, without no end. So this will be a kind of infinity in a sense, and it will be a numerical infinity. Right, so because we're talking about numbers here, right? Numbers of parts, right? Number of events or parts, right? One following another. But I think that there are some great difficulties with these ideas because I think there are some good arguments, sound arguments, which shows that these kind of infinities are not possible. Or so, for example, the Hilbert Hotel argument, which I talk about in my books, and also the argument against traversing an actual infinite. That a finite process, a finite plus finite should be equal to finite, right? So you cannot have the case that finite plus finite equal accumulate to form an actual infinite. That will not be logically possible. Yeah. So I think this will be some arguments.
That's a controversial point, even among logicians who have nothing to do with religion. I mean, that's a controversial point.
Well, I think
but the point is, at least to establish what we're saying, is that in Eastern traditions, many of them, they have this endless cyclicality that had no beginning and no end. And since there are universes or things that are happening that you can count, that's an actual infinity. It's the claim.
Yes, not only actual infinity, but also a traversing of actual infinite as well.
Okay.
Which I think is logically incoherent, actually.
Okay, not everybody thinks that, but that's a separate point. But we agree that it is an infinity and it's a traversing infinity, that you're going from one to the other.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, okay, good.
Yeah, but you don't find that
in Christianity, you don't?
No, yeah, that's right. Yeah, because God is not made up of parts, for example, and God doesn't live through an infinite process to arrive at the present. Rather, God is without beginning in the sense of being timeless at the initial state.
So right? That's a big controversy in Christianity, whether God is timeless, meaning outside of time, or God has no beginning and no end. But experiences time. So that's a very fundamental dispute within Christian philosophy or within Abrahamic philosophy, whether God is in time or not in time. Nobody doubts that God is infinite or is boundless and had no beginning and will have no end. Nobody doubts that. But as whether God experiences time in some analogous sense to the way we do, or is out of time and has this just one gigantic, inconceivable experience of everything all at once, right?
One key issue is how we define time, right? So there are different views about time. There's a substantial view, which regard time as a kind of substance, a kind of container sort of. And the other is a relational view of time, which regard time as a series of events.
Right.
Now, just now when I say that God is timeless, I'm thinking in terms of relational view, in the sense that there is no infinite sequence of events, but rather there's a state in which God exists in that state without any events in that state, but also without beginning. And so that is a kind of transcendent state, right? It transcends our observable universe, which is constituted by events and changes, for example. So in that initial state, whether God can enter into time or not, it's correct that you are correct to say that there are different Christians with different views about that.
But this is not as relevant in the Eastern traditions.
That's right. I mean, the Eastern traditions, so for example, in Buddhism, there's no discussion of these issues, right? And Taoism don't discuss this as well. But then I think this is a problem for their tradition because, as I said just now, so if there's no such ultimate initial state, then how I mean, this will if there's an infinite regress of events, I think that is a philosophical problem. And also in Taoism, for example, Taoism tries to address the issue of first cause by saying that, well, the Tao is the first cause. You can think of the Tao as the one who is the first cause and the ultimate reality, and the Tao is the one that brought forth other things. So there's this idea of spontaneous generation, and the Taoists understand this as saying that the Tao is 自然, so it's naturally it will give birth, right, to these things. So 道生一，一生二，二生三. So this is a Taoist idea. However, the Taoist idea has difficulty explaining how does the first event arise from the first cause. If the Tao is impersonal, if it's a natural thing, right, then the first event would have been coexistent and co-eternal with the first cause. But that cannot be the case because an event is something that has a beginning, right? An event is something that changes, something that happens, whereas the first cause is supposed to be something that has no beginning. And so there's a difficulty there in answering this question.
The first cause has to begin a beginning, has to do something to make the beginning.
And in order to do that, the first cause must have the capacity to bring about the first event by itself and also refrain from bringing about the first event in the initial state so that the first event is not co-eternal with the first cause. And so these two capacity...
But now you're introducing the concept of sequence of events or time within the first cause, which has its own logical difficulties.
Well, I don't think there's any logical difficulty if you think of the first cause as existing in an eternal state without the first event initially, but having the freedom of will to bring about the first event, which also starts time. And so these two capacity implies that the first cause is something that has free will, which means that it's a personal creator rather than a natural entity.
So you're making steps, and again, those are things that have been discussed for a long time, and there are many different positions, and I'd love to argue all of those. But I think what we can say is that has more steps than the Eastern traditions. The Eastern tradition has fewer steps. You don't need to go through those steps because you're just starting out. You think there's some logical problems with that, but at least it's simpler. There's less steps. Is that right?
It's simpler in the sense that what they are postulating is simpler, but I think we need to think deeper. And that's one good something that we see in the Western tradition that you want to keep on asking why and how and things like that, and get to the ultimate reality of things. And so as we think deeper using logical deduction in this way, we'll find that we cannot just stay with this simple understanding, but we need to probe deeper, right, to understand, to ask questions like why and how do the first event begin from the first cause, for example. And this will bring us to the conclusion that the first cause is actually a personal creator.